This is chapter 61 through 65 of 14 Ways to Die. 61. Emily is standing by the bus. She smiles and says, "Are you ready to see what all the fuss is about?" The rest of the school gives us the evil eye as they walk past because we're escaping for a week. Our normal clothes and suitcase is more offensive than if we were giving them the finger. Emily is doing her best not to pay attention to my head cam, although her eyes keep shooting up, then back to my face. When I woke up this morning, there was no one in my bedroom filming me, and I missed it. The thought of this being my last show was strange, and Emily's doing a terrible job of distracting me. It was weird how quickly I got used to Michael following me around, and now he's gone. Now I'm responsible for making this good enough. "You'll be fine," Emily says, because sometimes she does notice what's happening, and I hope she's right. Before we get on the bus, Mr. Collins barges over and starts handing out homework to the English Lit students missing this week's class. We don't argue because that would only make it worse. He would probably come back with twice as much. As well as working at St. Anthony's, Mr. Collins tutors 5th graders for their standardized tests, and I wonder if he's nicer to them or if all teachers have one way of teaching no matter who they're talking to. "Are you joining us?" Mr. Humphreys asks. Mr. Collins huffs, "I'll actually be working this week." Mr. Humphreys smiles like it's a joke, but you can see he's offended, and when Mr. Collins leaves, Emily whispers, "Prick." Mr. Humphreys grins until he catches me looking, then clears his throat and says, "Right, let's go." I'm not quite awake enough for maximum Emily, so I put my headphones on and stare out the window until Jamie strolls past, sees me, and waves. We didn't talk much after he caught Michael. I say, "Thank you," and he says, "Just doing my job." It was a strange thing to say, but much stranger things happened that night. Only now, seeing him watch the bus pull away, does a thought strike me like lightning. I wasn't live. It wasn't Monday. So how did Jamie know Michael was outside my window? And why the hell did he have a hammer? Whew. 62. We drive through huge iron gates and down a gravel path, and then someone gasps, and Emily says, "This is like my ideal wedding venue." From outside, it's red and big, and not what I pictured when I thought monastery. It looks like the luxury house from boring TV shows, the definition of grand. We've seen pictures online and on the PowerPoint Mr. Humphrey showed us in class. They didn't look like this. At the front doors, a guy stands arms crossed and smiling, and when we get out, he says, "Welcome to Mayfield Lodge. My name is Tim." Mr. Humphrey shakes his hand, then stares up at the house and smiles. He looks happier than he ever does at school. Behind me, Jennifer Erswell is giggling, saying what she would like to do to this Tim guy, and Emily makes a face because she secretly hates her. "Okay," Mr. Humphrey says, "hand over your phones." There's a collective, "What?" But then he looks serious and says, "House rules. If I told you to leave them at home, you'd have sneaked them in." Tim holds out a box, and one by one we give our phones while Mr. Humphreys watches. When we're done, Tim grins and says, "Grab your bags and we'll show you to your rooms." Inside, there are dark brown beams stretched high across the ceiling and a floor glistening with polish. "It's fucking awesome," someone mutters. Mr. Humphreys turns and says, "There will be none of that here. Have some respect." Along one wall, a line of people stand smiling at us, and one at a time they step forward and shake our hands. The girl in between me and Emily says, "Hello, I'm Saffron. Follow me." Emily gives me a nod and I shrug, and then we're being led down a hallway and up the stairs. I know I'm being quiet, but I'm still thinking about Jamie and the hammer. Luckily, Emily talks enough for both of us. At the end of the hallway, Saffron says, "Here you are." The room is basic, 2 beds and a sink and a desk, and Emily claims the bed by the window, then turns to Saffron and says, "I like this place." She smiles and shows us the bathrooms and the fire exit. The showers are just holes in the floor surrounded by thin plastic curtains. "So, do you live here?" Emily asks. "For now," says Saffron. Then she shows us the dining hall, which is like a converted barn with an alcove for the kitchen. The chairs have high backs, and the tables are shiny and already laid with silverware glistening under 2 enormous chandeliers. "I like what you've done with the place," Emily says, and Saffron smiles and walks away. "She's weird," I say. Emily nods. "She is, but this place." She leaves a gap that we both fill with our own adjectives, but only in our heads, and then the hall starts to fill up with the rest of the class and everyone is smiling. When Mr. Humphreys walks past, he says, "What do you think, girls?" Emily says, "It'll do." He laughs and collects his food from the kitchen, and we copy him. The tables are long like a medieval feast, which means Emily and I can't sit on our own. Instead, we have to sit with Ali Bullard and Pav Kerr and the Slovakian girl Maya, who only joined junior year and looks over 20. Isn't it amazing? Ali asks, and we nod and do our best to ignore her. Our group is 3 big, and that's how we like it. Without Hannah, it's the 2 of us, and we have no intention of faking friendships just because we're somewhere else. Even here, away from school, away from my family and the Magpie Man and everything I know, nothing has changed. Not really. At the next table, Jennifer Erswell says, "Isn't this place orgasmic?" Everything she says is sexual, even though we think she's never actually done it. I don't care either way. You don't scratch an itch like Jennifer. You let her talk and do your best to ignore her, or she'll latch on and never let go. I look around at all the cliques forced to mingle, at Saffron and the other volunteers, at Mr. Humphreys sitting with a woman who looks like a hippie and an old man with thin gray hair. I figure he's at least 80, and as I stare, his eyes quickly dart from his food to my face, and I look away. When I glance back, he's still staring at me, not smiling like the others, his face flat and emotionless. And when Emily sees what I'm doing, she nudges me and says, "I think he likes you." But I don't think he does. He doesn't seem happy to see me at all. The 4 boys in our class, Harrison, Yinka, Austin, and Sam, are squashed at one end of Jennifer's table, doing their best to leave a gap. They have a whole wing of the monastery to themselves, a room each, while we're sharing in 2s. They're nice enough, but I don't think they like being outnumbered. Only then do I remember that all this is being live streamed. My audience can see everything I can, and I wonder if it matters anymore. I touched the camera wrapped around my head and tried to recall when I got so comfortable wearing it. We put our lives out there in all sorts of ways, on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat, but it's always edited. We handpick our best moments and hope the world gives a shit. But this isn't a highlights reel. This is just a Monday. Not your average one, maybe, but not cut up and stuck back together to make it more interesting. I hope Danny is pleased with my first attempt at directing, even if it's our final show. 63. That evening we hang out in a huge living room with comfy sofas, all chatting about our first day. The volunteers stand around the edges, but only Emily and I notice. "Are they guarding us?" she asks. "They freak me out," I say. "Do you think they're being weird?" "They look drugged up," Emily says, and I know what she means. They have a dozy kind of happiness on their faces, smiling like drunk people laughing at jokes inside their own heads. Mr. Humphreys is standing by a bookcase, and the woman he ate dinner with claps and everyone quiets down. "We hope you've enjoyed your first day," she says. "My name is Andrea, and I would like you to act like kangaroos." We stare at one another, wondering if we misheard, but then she claps again and shouts, "Get up! Come on! This is not a drill! I want to see those kangaroos!" She's bouncing on the spot, and next to her Mr. Humphreys is smiling like this is totally normal. When she rubs her nose on his shoulder, he laughs. "Get up!" Andrea shouts. "Get up! Get up! Get up!" I stare at Emily, who glances at my headcam, then back at the bouncing, foolish person. I check that the red light is still on, because whatever this is, Danny won't want me to miss it. Pav whispers something to Ali, and Andrea swings around and says, You are my first kangaroo." Pav shakes her head and looks down, but the woman jumps forward and sticks her head under Pav's chin and nudges it, then sniffs her face. "Is that fear I can smell?" Andrea asks, but Pav doesn't answer, and everyone is doing their best not to make eye contact while still watching to see what happens next. Then Andrea grabs Pav's hand and pulls her up. Holding both arms, she starts pulling her up and down, whispering, "Boing, boing, boing," getting louder until she's shouting it. "Boing, boing, boing." And when she lets go, Pav keeps bouncing. Then Andrea is making her way around the room, saying, "You're no fun, you're no fun, you're no fun," tapping each of us on the head as she goes. The volunteers step forward and lift us up and make us bounce, and Saffron says, "Don't be scared." Pav is still doing it, laughing now and following Andrea around the room. Emily shrugs and says, "Why not?" and she jumps, and I try it just once and feel awkward for stopping. It feels like the first few moments of dancing when you know everyone is watching, and then it feels like the next few hours when you don't care. Before we realize it, we're bouncing all over the place, and I'm laughing, crashing into walls and sofas and people. After the last few weeks, it feels like a weight has been lifted. It feels like I'm floating. And then Andrea yells, "Stop!" And we do, and I'm clinging to Jennifer's shoulders, and we're both gasping and giggling and smiling at each other. "Okay," Andrea says, "stop where you are and talk to whoever is next to you. Stop acting like kangaroos and start acting like people." 64. That was clever, Jennifer says. We're all sitting down again, everyone talking to someone they used to do their best to ignore. I look over at Emily, who's chatting with the Slovakian girl, Maya, and they are laughing like they've been friends for years. Mr. Humphreys is talking to Yinka, Andrea to Pav, and everyone to someone outside their clique. I can't believe we did that, I say. Then I catch Jennifer looking at my headcam. Can they see you? What I mean is, did her parents sign the permission slip to unblur her face? She nods. I've watched some of it. I saw what happened to your window. That's all anyone wants to talk about now, and I hope it's not what I'm remembered for. What do you think of this place? I ask, trying to change the subject. Jennifer looks around and smiles. It's magical. I think back to dinner when she called it orgasmic, but don't mention that. She seems different now, and if Emily's right and she is pretending, I wish she'd drop the act. I like this version of Jennifer a lot more. Later, Andrea tells us to mingle, and by the end of the night, I've spoken to practically everyone here. Even the boys, who rarely say anything in class, can't stop talking. Forgetting to act cool, they are just normal. When we go to our rooms, I push my bed in front of the door because there's no lock, and Emily says, I don't think you need to do that here. I know what she means, but I do it anyway. Then we talk until Emily's whispers turn to snores. At midnight, I turn the camera off and put it back in my suitcase. I thought the first day here would be the hardest because the world was watching, but no one seemed to care. We all let go and acted like kangaroos and talked honestly, and if we were that open with a camera in our face, I can't wait for the rest of the week. 65. After breakfast, Mr. Humphreys asks us to line up outside. When he starts reading our names 2 at a time, my stomach flips. Jess, he says, you're with Bernie today. We exchange looks, then stare at the ground, and I wonder if she feels as awkward as I do. Bernie, my old best friend, 1/3 of a group we assumed was more special than it turned out to be. I hope I never think of Emily and Hannah like that, as a moment in time, a hobby we grew out of. I haven't really spoken to Bernie since we were kids. We were inseparable when she lived next door. Then her mom remarried and they moved to Harmony. Although it was only a bus ride away, she changed schools, and by the time we arrived at St. Anthony's, we were strangers. I guess we were drifting apart even before she moved, when Bernie was kept away from the girl with the murdered mom as if tragedy were contagious. So basically this pairing could have been better. This is a spirit walk, Andrea says. Be as open and honest as you wish, but try to enjoy it. I look at Emily, who's been paired with Yinka, and she nods at Bernie and mouths, awkward. The way every friendship group has been split, you know Mr. Humphreys fixed it. But after last night, I shouldn't have been surprised. Mayfield Lodge is surrounded by countryside, and every 5 minutes they send another pair through the gates, one going right, the next left, then right again. If you bump into another pair, just keep walking, Andrea says. This is a 2-person exercise. What should we talk about? Austin asks. Andrea smiles. Everything. Off you go, she tells us, and Bernie starts walking without looking at me. Emily laughs and I roll my eyes, then follow. Everywhere there are cows and sheep and huge green fields. It feels like Harmony, only there's no sea breeze and no sound of the waves, only a gentle buzz of insects and birds singing. For a long time we don't say anything. We look at the other way and pretend this isn't weird. Our conversations ran out a long time ago, but not talking is making me feel sick, so I say a few things in my head, then one out loud. I'm glad I came, I say. Bernie looks at me. Me too. I wasn't going to, I say, and Bernie nods. Me neither. Then she turns her head back to the cows in the field, and I think that's the end of it. But still looking away, she says, I wish it was like this all the time. There are no animals on my side of the road, just green, but this is where I look and what I talk to. What did you think of the kangaroo thing, I ask. Bernie says, probably the same as you. I look at her then, and she's already looking at me, the faintest impression of a smile on her face. She's prettier than when we were friends. Her hair looks better, but her smile hasn't changed, and suddenly I miss her. God knows what they've got planned for tonight, she says. I laugh and realize this couldn't have happened yesterday. With the camera pointed at her face, Bernie wouldn't have said a word. She knew me when I had a mom, and being alone with her now, for the first time in forever, I want to cry. By the time I got to middle school, I was old news. When you're a kid and it's your first day at a new school, a part of you wants to shout how your mom was murdered to get it out of the way. Nan said I should find out who my friends were first. She said it's easy to be liked for the wrong reasons. That's why I waited to tell Hannah and Emily about the magpie man. But Bernie knew so much earlier, and that should mean more than it does. 10 years later, forced together by the flick of a teacher's pen, she says, "How's your dad?" "He's okay," I lie. I don't tell her that what he's doing right now, is sitting, staring, remembering a life that feels impossible. "I always liked him," Bernie says. "I miss my dad so much. I don't see him anymore." Her parents got divorced when we were babies, but he still picked her up on weekends. He'd wait outside and she would run to him, and they'd do whatever dads and daughters do when they only have a day to do it. I remember once he argued with her mom's new boyfriend, Bernie's mom begging them not to, while we watched from a window, and after that he stopped ringing the bell. Families break in all sorts of ways, and I should feel sorry for her, but I don't. She was one of the first examples of how people drift away after death. Our playdates going from weekly to rarely to never, because whose parents want their kids hanging out in a house of grief? She stays quiet for a while, then she says, "My mom barely talks to me anymore. My sister's the princess, and I'm something else." Bernie didn't have a sister when I knew her, but 10 years is a long time, and I guess her mom's second marriage is going better than her first. "I'm sure she loves you," I say, and Bernie gives the slightest nod, then a shake and a sigh. "All she wants to know is what I'm going to do next," she says. "It's like she's forcing me out of the house. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm 16. "I don't know either." "But you have an excuse," Bernie says. Then, "Sorry, I just mean no one will pressure you to do anything. Your dad won't force you to apply to college if you don't want to." We haven't had that talk yet because I don't think college is for me. I'm scared of starting another new life far away from the only people who get me, and I'm scared of leaving Dad on his own. If things were different, if Bernie were still my best friend, I'd tell her the truth. I would explain how the 11th grade career day terrified me, how the thought of college placement tests and personal statements makes me feel sick. That is all that matters at St. Anthony's. They don't care about the kids who aren't interested in degrees. When they handed out questionnaires asking where we saw ourselves in 5 years, there wasn't a box marked "Secure Justice for Dead Mom." That's so sad. "I'll probably look after my dad," I say. "He's kind of useless." It's supposed to be a joke because I would rather laugh about it than admit I'd be useless without him too. But Bernie looks serious and says, "That's not fair. You know what I'd give to have my dad back?" Like Emily's mom, she doesn't understand that death is different from divorce. She thinks all loss is measured the same, even the kind you can fix. "No offense, Bernie, but you have no idea what I've been through. I'm allowed to joke about my dad." She's facing the field again, and for a long time she doesn't speak until she says, "And I can still miss mine." "You can, but don't think it's the same thing. My mom died. She's never coming back. If your dad decides to give a shit, he could see you next week." I think that's the end of the conversation, and I hope they don't ask us to go over it when we get back, because I don't think this is what they were hoping for. It's not until we are about to walk through the gate that Bernie, still with her face away from me, says, "Fuck you, Jess."